So here we are continuing on with the dump truck conversion project. The motor and transmission are out of the dump truck two-wheel drive chassis. I've now exposed this area, and it's easier to see on the front end anyhow where the front leaf spring bracket will have to be mounted. That's coming off the four-wheel drive. Approximately there'll have to be a hole here, two holes here, in this general area. Obviously I'm gonna have to take some care in making sure these measurements are pretty close. There'll be a hole here for a bolt, and one here, and then it utilizes 3 bolts for the core support mount as well. So I'll have to take these 3 out because that spring mounts on the inside of here. The 3 bolts I was talking about needing drilled. Sorry about that. One in this general area, 2 in this area, and then it also utilizes the 3 rivets from the core support mount. So I'll have to cut those off to put bolts in to bolt the bracket on. Additionally, there'll be a section of this bottom frame rail that I will have to torch out. It will need to be cut out to allow the spring shackle to work for the leaf springs, which will be here once they're hooked up to the mount. Additionally, this does expose the bolts that I was referring to earlier regarding the pivots. This is the pivot for the arm on the driver's side of the suspension system on this two-wheel drive. These were the bolts I was mentioning would be easier for me to get to while the motor's out. So I'll be removing this assembly and putting in the mounting brackets for the pivot system on the independent four-wheel drive front axle while this engine's out. These 2 bolts as well, which obviously are going to be a lot easier to access with the motor out of the truck. Otherwise, you know, the frame is in pretty good shape, as I kind of suspected from looking at the rest of it. The motor mount brackets are good. The motor mounts are actually good on the old motor as well. Really, this assembly here, the sway bar assembly, will have to come out, and there's actually a plate on my four-wheel drive that I think it should bolt to the same spot here. I hope the same holes, and that there's a bracket, a cross member that goes across the front of the frame on my four-wheel drive. I suspect that assembly is in place to hold the front end together here, a little bit more support for the leaf springs, because the leaf springs hang way out, almost past the bumper actually on a four-wheel drive, at least right to the edge of the front bumper. Like I said, everything, you know, now that I've gotten in here, looks like it's in pretty good shape. It looks like at some point somebody's replaced the slave cylinder on the clutch assembly. I've never seen one with a red hose. The ones I've always seen were black, but I don't know if that was replaced recently at some point or not. But so basically that's where things are at here. Four-wheel drive is now in the shop. It took its last run as it's currently assembled, and tonight I'll be working on getting the drive shaft out and getting the transfer case popped out of that truck. Here's the motor. There'll be some things on this that I will be taking. My engine has never had a dipstick, so I'm going to take that off and put that on my other truck. The transmission here, the bell housing is in good shape. You know, so worst case scenario here, I've got some extra parts, another transmission. These transmissions will interchange between two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. You just have to take this back piece off, and then there's a separate connector, you know, type piece that goes between the transmission and the transfer case on a four-wheel drive. But I've swapped those two-wheel drive transmissions to a four-wheel drive fairly easy, as long as you have the adapter piece. It's not a very complicated process actually at all. So yeah, that's kind of where it's at. This is out here for now. You know, and I'll have an extra motor. Like I said, I never ascertained exactly what is wrong with this one. told they kind of diagnosed it down to being the gears were worn off the crank side of the timing chain setup. So if that's the case, that's a relatively easy fix. I don't foresee me needing this engine in the near future, but you know, the parts are here. It does have a brand new starter actually. A little bit hard to see because it's buried down in that tire, but the starter's virtually brand new, it looks like. So bell housing, as I looked at it, didn't have any cracks or anything on it. You know, the clutch is there, the flywheel. So, you know, it's coil, distributor and stuff, and I'll have some extra parts. This truck, the 85, still had all the emissions business on it. I guess that's what all this junk is here too. I removed all that stuff off my other one, so I do not really know how any of this business works. It would all come off if I were to use this engine anyhow. So, but that's where we're at. The measurements here all do indicate everything's going to be okay. As far as, you know, mounting my leaf springs and the TTB axle, just going to be a little bit of work. And that's about it for now. So one more thing I will mention that's going to have to be done, part of this project, which I knew and expected, but something to consider, I guess, if you're really fooling around with this kind of a setup too much. Going from a 4-wheel drive to a 2-wheel drive, obviously the addition of the spacer and the transfer case shortens the length of the rear drive shaft that was existing in the 2-wheel drive. And the drive shaft setup out of this 4-wheel drive truck obviously won't work either. It's too long because it's out of an extended cab. So I've got an extra about 2 feet of drive shaft on the 4-wheel drive truck, and I'm expecting approximately 8 extra